Okay, this is part 14. If you're finding this video for the first time and you're on 14, you're going to need to start at video 1 because it's an allegorical language. And at part 14, there's a lot of things we've covered. And if you haven't seen 1 through 13, you're not going to know all the detail. So I haven't really mentioned that in other videos, but I wanted to mention it here because I see a lot of people are jumping in on video 8 and 9, and they're probably so confused. But anyway, this is video 14. And we're going to pick up with Gary Lockwood. Gary Lockwood stars in 2001: A Space Odyssey. He plays Frank Poole. He also is in the first Star Trek ever. And he's also the first guest star in the first Star Trek. And this is a picture of him in the episode. It's called Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is literally space because no one's gone in space. So the odd thing with this episode is it wasn't the first episode ever produced, although it does end up being the first one that airs. And the story behind that is interesting. This is the first episode of Star Trek, and it was entitled The Cage. This was the first episode ever produced, and the one and only two-part episode, and also the only two-part episode and the only episode at all that was written by Gene Roddenberry. So the only episode of Star Trek that is ever written by Gene Roddenberry is the first one, called The Cage. They produced the episode, and after they produce it, they show it to the censors, and the censors are not happy with The Cage. They tell them that it's too cerebral, people are going to start thinking, and we don't really want people to start thinking. So they re-edit this episode, and it ends up airing mid-season. I believe it's 11 and 12 are the episodes. I'm going to check on that, but I would bet money it's 11 and 12 or 12 and 13, one or the other. But it airs mid-season, and this episode is very odd. They essentially live on a planet, or they land on a planet, and the residents of the planet have extremely powerful brains, and they're able to create illusions that are indistinguishable from reality, and it poses a problem for Captain Pike. He's the first captain of Star Trek. And then we have Susan Oliver here. She's Green Girl. So there's always a color we're looking for. Green Girl. And this woman here is Gene Roddenberry's wife. And she ends up being in lots of Star Trek stuff. And she wears her hair red now. And not that I don't know if she's a real redhead or not. It doesn't look like she is, but it could be very dark red. But anyway, that's irrelevant. This is the first one produced. The censors don't like it. They said it's too cerebral. And they tell Gene and all the staff that, listen, what we're really looking for is an extension of the cowboy movies and cowboy TV shows. We want a lot of fist fights in it. We want a lot of confrontation. We don't want any thinking really going on. So concentrate on the fist fights, the fighting, and stuff like that. So in response to getting this show, here's another shot of it. They're in the cage, and we have a redhead here, Yeoman Colt, which is a young male horse. She is the redhead. We have Susan Oliver, Captain Pike, and Gene Roddenberry's wife. And we have the Talosians. Talos is a synonym for Gaia, which is a synonym for Earth. And they have these really large butt heads. They have little butt crease in the back of their heads. So the censors say, no, this is not going to cut it. We're going to have to edit this. And you really need to watch, if you can find this online. I'll see if I can find a link to this movie. The Cage is very difficult to find. The Menagerie you could find all over, but The Cage is the one you really want to see because it's pre-edited. So they decide they don't want to go with this, so they have to film an entirely new episode. This is where Gary Lockwood comes along. Gary Lockwood, the bullfighter who knew Slim Pickens, the matador. He ends up being the first guest star on the first Star Trek. And of course, the whole recommendations from the censors were, we need more fist fights, we need more confrontation. So Gary Lockwood becomes this supernatural, godlike figure in the show, and of course he has a protracted fist fight with the new captain. This is the second Kirk. Captain Pike was the first. This is the second captain, 1 and 2. Apollo 1, Apollo 1, 1 and 2. So he's the second Captain Kirk, and he has a protracted, ridiculously long fist fight with Gary Mitchell. Let me see, I think I have some pictures of it. Here's Green Girl. Yeah, he's shooting the phaser at him, and what else here? Anyway, the point here is they end up doing exactly what the censors wanted. They wanted more fistfights, they wanted more confrontation, they wanted fighting. So he becomes superhuman, he tries to kill Kirk, and he's going to bury him in his grave, and they had this ridiculous fistfight. And during the fistfight, Shatner's shirt gets ripped, which is just like Danny's sweater gets ripped in The Shining. So this is one of the first episodes, or the first episode ever is an episode where Shatner's shirt gets ripped. And I know I have a picture of it here. I'll find it later in the video, I'm sure. But anyway, this shows you that the censors didn't like this episode. It was too cerebral. It was about a mentally superior race taking advantage of more primitive life forms. They essentially capture them in a cage where they can't escape, and they observe them, and they can see through their eyes. They can feel their own feelings as they're doing these little illusions here. It's very strikingly like the world we live in today. So this is the first one, the film. It airs mid-season. It gets heavily edited. This is the first ever Star Trek starring Gary Lockwood, the superhuman man that has a protracted fist fight with Captain Kirk, which is what the censors wanted. They wanted more fist fights. They wanted it to be like a Western. They wanted to transition from the Western shoot 'em up, barroom brawl shows to Star Trek. So they wanted to make sure there was fist fights in it. So this is the episode that's produced to make sure the censors get their fist fights. This whole thing is parodied in South Park. You have the Timmy and Jimmy fight. And let me see if I can find some pictures of that. So you have, the producers of South Park are always putting out comical things in their show. So here's Timmy and Jimmy. They're in an alleyway. You got the garbage can, and Jimmy is kneeing him right in the balls repeatedly, which happens in the movie They Live. So we have this protracted fighting scene that keeps getting mirrored, in South Park. It's getting mirrored in They Live. It's getting mirrored. Yeah, here's They Live. They have the protracted fist fight. This scene represents when you try to wake somebody up who's not awake. It's a very difficult process. It's not fun because they kick you in the balls as many times as they can, although I've become immune to it at this point. But there's a lot of ball kicking and beating to get somebody to open their eyes. So, we have this scene, we have Timmy and Jimmy, we have the Star Trek where they wanted more fist fights, and then we have the beginning episode that created all this. They saw this, they didn't like it. It was too cerebral. We don't like that. So it becomes the fist fight episode with Gary Lockwood, the first Star Trek guest star. He's a bullfighter or a bull rider. There's a lot of really good genius level fan art out there, and I've only touched a fraction of it. I gave you the One-Eyed Jacks thing, or All Things Jack. I gave you the playing card stuff. Well, here's another one here. We're working on Jungian birthdays is how the puzzle works. So here's somebody's done Danny's little number 1 finger that he does in the movie, and it says happy birthday. And of course it's reversed because we're using mirroring, doubling, 1, 1, 1. So once again, there's a million fan art pictures out there. You really need to do a search for Kubrick fan art and spend a couple hours looking at what's out there, because there's some very smart people out there and very talented artists. This is just another example of the shiners out there. They're all over. Here's Gary Lockwood. They wear silvered eyes in this. So you have the gold room, and The Lone Ranger and his horse Silver. All right, let's get out of this. Areas with the silver eye. Apparently this is very uncomfortable for the actors. They could not stand these silver contacts in their eyes. And they couldn't see anything when they had them in. So this episode's kind of boring. Not a lot happens in it. There's some fist fights and they shoot the phaser and blah, blah, blah. Now this episode, on the other hand, is fascinating. It airs mid-season. It's renamed The Menagerie. And the parts they edit out are dealing with how smart and how powerful the Telosians' mind control is. So that's interesting. We see it. We're clued into Rudyard Kipling in The Shining with Jack says, "White Man's Burden." "White Man's Burden" is a poem written by Rudyard Kipling, and it's essentially about imperialism and how the white man needs to bring, his knowledge to the lesser races. It's a very racist, imperialistic poem. Kipling also does "The Man Who Would Be King." "The Man Who Would Be King" is parodied in Star Wars. There's little clues to "The Man Who Would Be King" in Star Wars, like Han Solo is frozen for 1,000 years, and I'm not going to list them out, but there's actually a couple of people who have done videos on the subtle clues to "A Man Who Would Be King" hidden in the movie Star Wars. There's also clues to "The Man Who Would Be King" hidden in the movie Stargate, which is weird, starring Kurt Russell. And so you wonder, why are we being pointed to "The Man Who Would Be King"? Well, "The Man Who Would Be King" is a story about two essentially nefarious men who get in trouble, and then they get sent into a more primitive group of people, and the first thing they do is they try to steal everything they have. They steal their gold, and one man wants to stay and rule them all. So the man who would be king, is part of this. When a less advanced race encounters a more advanced race, there's a natural tendency for the more advanced race to essentially rule the the more primitive peoples. So, we see this. Oh, sorry about that. We see this in The Cage. We have the Telosians are easily able to manipulate the humans, and the Telosians are looking for a slave race. Their planet was blown up in a nuclear war, and it's just now starting to recover, but it's too dangerous for them to work on the surface, and they're more cerebral. They don't really do physical labor anymore. Everything happens in their minds. So they're looking for a race that will help them survive their cataclysm that they lived through. And they select the humans because they say, oh, the humans, they love to be taken advantage of, he says in the show. And they create all these illusions, and they tell Captain Pike he would essentially be like Adam and Eve. So they would be the first two humans on the planet, and they could basically do anything they wanted. Any illusion they could imagine, they could be given, and the riches beyond their imagination. And of course, Captain Pike refuses this. And Gene Roddenberry's wife, at the end of near the end of the episode, she decides to put her phaser on overload and kill them all. And she says she would rather commit suicide than create a slave race of humans on a planet. And the Telosians are shocked by this, and finally they let Captain Kirk go. So it's an interesting episode, and it's interesting why the censors really did not like this episode at all. They were immediately killed the whole thing. Now, the funny thing is, this is the best episode, or the only two-part episode of Star Trek. You have the double doors on room 237. The one elevator becomes two elevators in the movie. Everything is doubled or mirrored from the book to the movie. You've got one caretaker becomes Delbert Grady, Charles Grady. He becomes two caretakers. So, this you need to watch this episode. I'm not going to interpret what it means. I'm going to leave it up to you. But we are clearly being pointed to this episode by Kubrick, and one wonders why. Now let's see what else we got here. Yeah, here she's setting the phaser to overload to kill them all. Yeah, this is Gene Roddenberry's wife. This is the first Captain Pike, first Captain Kirk, or the first Star Trek Captain, Captain Pike. This is Susan Oliver. She's a jet plane pilot, and she's Green Girl. And also I want to mention Oliver is also a type of tractor. Keep that in the back of your mind. Like John Deere and Caterpillar. Like Danny has a Caterpillar bulldozer. Timmy and Jimmy. They live. This movie is alchemical. And this movie is also part of Kubrick's puzzle. So you need to watch this movie and take notes because there's a lot of stuff in it. But, you know, it's all about opening your eyes and opening the doors of perception. You know, you have little Alex jumps out the attic door, you know, and tries to kill himself, and the Bombay doors, and Jack's blasting the door open, and Dave Bowman's blasting the door to get back into the spaceship, and, you know, he says, Hal, open the pod bay doors, and Hal says, no, I'm not going to. So you have to smash the pod bay doors open with a jackhammer, or a Collins axe, or a bone weapon, or a baseball bat, or whatever you can get your hands on. You need to break the door down. And if it takes sunglasses, whatever, do it. This is the woman that is the second guest star, female, or the first female guest star on Star Trek. She ends up in the show, she ends up in the movie MASH. She plays Hot Lip Houlihan. You know, I'm not going to go into MASH right now, but, you know, you've got BJ Honeycutt and I forget the other guy's name. And they're moonshiners, you know, they're distilling whiskey right in their tent. So I would say that series is alchemical. You know, they wear ski goggles. That's pretty funny. The Telosians, the only two-part episode, airs mid-season, episode 11 and 12. Here's a little clue, you know, to Kubrick's chess allegory. Well, we're playing chess, but we're not really playing normal chess. If you take a movie, say it's an hour-long movie, you could view that movie as a recording of that hour-long time hypercube. It's little slices, each one's at 1/24th of a second, of what happened during that movie. So the movie itself is much like a hypercube. Now, if you have 13 movies, which is what we're talking about in Kubrick's puzzle, you have 13 different hypercubes. So each hypercube is a different time and place. You know, you have Barry Lyndon is in history, older history. You have 2001 is supposedly set in the future. You have Full Metal Jacket is during Vietnam, and Paths of Glory is World War I. So you have all these different hypercube slices of time. And so we're playing chess, but we're playing four-dimensional chess. There's 13 movies. Each one is a hypercube. There's a message in all of them. The message is not in one hypercube. The message is in all of them. So if we're playing chess, we're really playing 3D chess. So we go to Star Trek, and, you know, Captain Kirk is playing. This is one of the promos for the show. And Spock says, I'll have you checkmated in 3 moves. And Kirk turns around and checkmates him. And it's pretty interesting. But we're being clued into the chessboard and Kubrick's chess allegory. And we see the chessboard, and we also see, you know, you see a lot of the Kubrickian breadcrumbs in the show, Star Trek. You know, you have Scotty. And what does Scotty do? Scotty likes to drink. He's always drinking the whiskey, you know. So all the little Kubrickian breadcrumbs are in here. You know, you have the colors, and you always know which guy's going to die when he goes to the planet, because, you know, the guy wearing the wrong color shirt is the guy that dies. So next time you watch Star Trek, you might want to watch it with a different set of eyes, because there's a lot of things in here. You know, here's another football clue. You know, I played for Notre Dame. This guy's name is Mr. Touchdown. So when we find Woody Strode, you know, we know we're looking, you know, we've been clued into football players and baseball players and tennis players and billiard players and croquet players and golf. You know, we have ping pong, lots of different ball players, which goes back to like the first few videos I did where I named all the balls that are in the movies. This is an interesting memo. I'm going to zoom in so you can read some of it, hopefully. And this is the memo to the Bell Telephone Laboratories. This is the Bell Telephone video phone. And it says, recently Arthur C. Clarke, author of Voice Across the Sea and many other nice books, and Frederick Ordway, ding, 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 NASA, the third. He's the third, so he's a junior. But a scientific consultant of Polaris Productions, which was the 2001 A Space Odyssey, was Polaris Productions, the North Star. They want to enlist the Bell Laboratories to help them simulate communications equipment for a very lush science fiction picture, with Polaris making. So this is the memo that they send. Bell Telephone Laboratories is talking about. Kubrick wants to use their Bell telephone from the World's Fair, and he also mentions down here the Whirlpool. Okay, Whirlpool. Coriolis is one of the categories. What is Coriolis? Where do we see Coriolis? In the Whirlpool. So he's using Whirlpool, and it's Polaris Productions, and it's the Bell video phone, which was seen at the World's Fair. And the question of such no screen credit can be. So this is, I didn't pull the Bell video phone out of thin air again. There's lots of little clues to it. This is another thing I didn't mention in the last video, is the little Kubrick that he left on the moon, the one on Apollo 15, the mission that launches on his birthday, and the day Diane Arbus dies in her bathtub when she slits her wrist. The Kubrick on the moon and the Kubrick that the artist shows us are different. This one has had its legs beveled out a little bit. And, I'm interpreting this, you may not agree with my interpretation, but I'm interpreting this as, this is a clothespin, we're weaving Jungian threads together, and we have the cashmere sweater in 2001 A Space Odyssey, we have the handmade Apollo sweater, we have the hand-woven wicker hats and wicker chairs, and we have the terrier dog. We're being clued into weaving, and so I think Kubrick beveled this a little bit to make it look more like a clothespin. Once again, maybe I'm wrong, but even if I'm not, it doesn't really matter. This is the only art piece on the moon. It's called a Kubrick. So Kubrick put a Kubrick on the moon. It's very clever. Here, more fan art. I mean, this is pure genius here. The movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Shining and Kubrick's Puzzle are linked together. It's a little point to mental facilities like the Fairfield Mental Hospital, home of MK Ultra. So we have the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest cuckoo clock, and so it's One Flew Over the Clockwork Orange cuckoo clock. I don't know. It's just genius. I love it. Here's redhead Nicole and her daughter sitting right over here in this area, another redhead. And she's wrapping a book on Van Gogh, a redhead who had one ear. So this is a one ear, one eye, the one eye jack thread. I couldn't find a picture of it before, but I found it, so I figured I'd include it. Now you know that I'm not. Now you know what it looks like. Here's the protracted fist fight when encountering people who are asleep. Now we learned an important lesson. Yes, we did. We need to work together. I mentioned bathrooms. Well, this is Eyes Wide Shut. We have the redhead prostitute who has AIDS. It's another clue to AIDS is a fabricated eugenics program disease. And Tom Cruise is sitting on the bathtub. We're in her bathroom right now. So even though you don't know you're in the bathroom, you're in the bathroom. And here Spock screws up and he shows emotion when he's not supposed to. Continuity error. Captain Pike in the original show was not a redhead, but when he comes back in the episode where they go back to Talos, now he has red hair. And you notice he's lost his arms and his legs and his hands, and he's much like the thing where Barry Nelson says, he cut his family up into little pieces and he stacked them neatly in the West Wing. Well, Kubrick cut up his movie into little pieces and stacked it neatly. And, that's why we see the one-armed man. Dr. Kimball is looking for the one-armed man. And you have the one-eyed Jack's allegory. It goes on and on and on. The one leg in Barry Lyndon, the one leg in They Live. In the beginning of it, there's a gentleman in a wheelchair, and Roddy Piper's walking into the unemployment office, and there's a guy who wheels out, and he's only got one leg. And there's always clues to missing appendages, because he chopped his family up, with the Collins Act. So here's Captain Pike, and now he's got red hair. So isn't that interesting? Captain Pike has red hair. Here's Yeoman Colt again. We have the Mare, and the Filly, and the Colt, and Blackjack, and Red Room. She's a redhead, Susan Oliver, the green girl. Here's Crazy Earl, and it says, I know this is a horrible picture, but this is the White Rabbit in Full Metal Jacket, and he bends down to pick it up, and it's a landmine, and it blows up and kills him. So we got Crazy Earl, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This man is clearly a psychotic, and it goes on and on and on and on. He's loony, he's nutty, he's fruity. So you got the Apple is Ringo in Chinese. You've got Apple Records. You've got the Big Apple in New York City. You've got a Manhattan is made with whiskey and OJ. You've got, lots of little clues here. This goes to fan art again. This is pure genius. Kubrick's unmade movie is Napoleon. And here we have, Napoleon on his horse, no less, and he's directing the battle. This is Kubrick from the grave. The scene in 2001, A Space Odyssey, where he's laying in a bed and pointing at the monolith, is Kubrick on his deathbed, pointing his finger at Saturn saying, I beat you. I beat you. So this is Kubrick, directing the troops. And I think he would have made a great general. I mean, he was a better movie maker, but he would have made a great general. Let's close that out. This is Woman in Terrier. And if you notice, they're at an airport, and we see a plane taking off in the background. So it's a little clue to Flat Earth and planes. Here's the torn shirt. This is the first episode of Star Trek that airs, starring Gary Lockwood, the bullfighter. They have long, protracted, drawn-out, ridiculous, boring fistfight, and he tears his uniform. And these uniforms change after that. They're totally redone. Here's MJ12. I told you James Forrestal was a member. Well, there's James Forrestal. He was a boxer. You almost don't even have to know that. I mean, you just look at his nose and you go, yeah, this man clearly was a boxer. So he hangs out with Gene Tooney, and they do workouts with the troops and stuff. And so Forrestal jumps out of the 13th floor of Bethesda Mental Hospital after he writes his little poem that he read, Sophocles, about the nightingale. So this man is intrinsically involved in Operation High Jump. He's involved in MJ12. And he's personal friends with Admiral Byrd. So this man is really connected into this whole high jump, long jump, UFO crash thing. So did the UFO that crashed in Corona come from another star system? Or did it just come from Antarctica? I think we know the answer to that. Here's another little clue to Monarch. This is a Monarch butterfly Tiffany lamp. Tiffany is, you have the Cartier fight. You have the Tiffany cufflinks in Full Metal Jacket. You've got the Tiffany lamp. That's the Monarch. You've got the Monarch poster in the games room in The Shining. So Jewelers is a clue. And, it's not too long before you go, well, geez, Admiral Byrd was on the Longines chronoscope. Longines is a jeweler. They make watches. So lots of little clues. The Monarch lamp here. The cuckoo clock. The Roadrunner is a cuckoo. This is goes back to the beginning. I wanted to recover this again because I didn't have good pictures of it. But this is a scene from Lolita, and we have Peter Sellers wearing a toga. And he says, how about a lovely little game of ping pong? So we find the Jungian archetypes. We find Jung. We find Kubrick. We find Huxley. And we find out, they're all born the same day. And then we start finding people that are dying the day they're born. And we find like a chain link between death day, birthday, death day, birthday, death day, that are included with the people that Kubrick is putting in his puzzle. So when Sellers says, how about a lovely little game of Roman ping pong, he means Roman ping pong would be with thumbs up is you're alive, thumbs down is you're dead. So it's ping pong. So, we ping and then we pong here. So when you see me in these videos going ping pong on the birthday, death day, it's not like Scatman Crothers dies November 22nd, 1986. Jamie Lee Curtis is born November 22nd, 1943, I think. I could be wrong. And so it's ping pong. It's the same day, their birthday, death day. You know, there are a lot of clues in Star Trek. They're not just a one episode. The Cage is not the only episode you need to look at. There's a lot of, you know, here we have Apollo and Captain Kirk, and we got a redhead. So, yeah, here's Gary Lockwood. He imagined a grave for Captain Kirk, and it appears, and he's about to kill Captain Kirk, and Kirk shoots a rock, and it falls on him, and the monolithic rock crushes him. And the Telosians. So this is the allegorical thing we're being pointed to here. Like a race of people that have, instead of focusing on the physical strengths and agility and stuff like that, they took all their energies and focused it on their brains. So one can only imagine, you know, what they've come up with. And in this series, they live underground. So we had the movie Carson City, a movie about tunneling through a mountain. We have the mine shaft gap. So now we have the Telosians who live underground. There's also another Colville painting which I haven't gotten into yet, and it's called A Boy and His Dog in the St. John River. Well, it turns out A Boy and His Dog was also a movie, and it was written by Harlan Ellison. Harlan Ellison is the man that wrote The Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the Terminator is actually the farthest point you can see on a flat plane. So I found that interesting that they named a movie after that point in space where you can't see any farther. And then you find out Harlan Ellison writes it. Harlan Ellison also writes A Boy and His Dog. It's starring Don Johnson. So we had Lyndon Johnson, Barry Lyndon, Jack is John's son, or it's Danny is John's son, Danny is Jack's son.